Yes! Thank you so much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Andertons TV video. And today, my very special guest is Bill Kelliher from one of the coolest rock and roll bands on the planet, Mastodon. Thank you so much.
It's actually Whalecore.
It's Whalecore.
Whalecore, yes. That's what we like to be referred to as. But
oh, you mean not rock and roll? Whalecore.
Yeah, rock and roll. It sounds so old. I'm only 52.
Fine.
We are considered vintage now, though. I think we've been around for just about 25 years. So, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Where did that 25 years go as well?
Where did it fucking go?
I know.
It's in these lines under my eyes and these grays and the.
Doesn't like the year 2000 just seem like what we did the other day? You know.
Well. Yeah, it does. Y2K, remember? Turn off your computers before...
Yeah, absolutely. Don't take a flight or anything like that.
Yeah, everything, planes will drop from the skies, you know. Armageddon is here. It's funny. Yeah, it seems like only yesterday, yet it was, what, 23 fucking years ago.
Yes, that is frightening. Well, look, thanks so much for coming over. And I know you're only in England for a few days, so really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I love cold weather and freezing nights. And
it's not going to get any warmer when you get home, though, is it?
It's a little bit warmer.
Is it a teeny bit warmer?
Yeah.
It is unseasonably cold here at the moment.
Oh, it's brutal.
Well, look, thanks for coming over. And as with all of these kind of videos, I like to get to know my guest, find out what it was when they were growing up that inspired them to be a guitar player and what it was that shaped their guitar playing style. I love the fact that you and I are very, very similar age, so I'm kind of hoping as we go through this journey, it'll be fun for me as well, because I go, oh yeah, I remember that, and I remember that as well. Mm-hmm. So tell us, you know, life back in, did you grow up in Atlanta?
No, I grew up in a little town called Victor, New York.
Okay.
So not too far from Niagara Falls.
Oh, beautiful.
Buffalo. We're on the big lake there, Lake Ontario. Colder than it is here, 6 feet of snow, lots of the time. Ugh, brutal winters. So I had to move somewhere warm. About 25 years ago, moved to Atlanta. But
so your whole childhood though was in this, you know, where you grew up.
Cold area, gray, cold, blue, you know, white collar. Well, blue collar, I guess, kind of place.
Tons and tons of great music coming out in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Especially, I think, you know, real formative years for sort of heavier guitar style music. But tell me, you know, what was playing in your household? Your earliest memories of what was playing in your household?
My dad, he came over as an immigrant from Ireland and immediately started working at his own hi-fi business. And basically, you know, I saw the creation of like the CD player, you know, we always had record players all over and tons of jazz records, but remember when Dad brought home, my earliest recollection was like CD player and hearing the Beatles, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, like blaring. He was showing off to his friends, blaring it down below my bedroom, and I remember looking over the balcony and just like, is there a real band playing down there? Because it sounded so crisp and so clear. And I was just like fascinated by this, you know, because all I knew was records back then, this little disc like that spinning in a little machine and producing such great sounds. So when I first started playing guitar, which I was 15, and I begged and begged and begged my parents for a guitar, ran around the house with a tennis racket, just like strumming on it. Well, I had about 6 or 7 really close friends, all the same age, going to school together and lived in the neighborhood, and they all played guitar for a few years before me. So I was like the last guy to get the guitar. I was always, you know, I'd pick theirs up and strum a little bit, but they were all, you know, they're all doing that, you know, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like, I want to do that too, you know, and yeah, so I finally got a guitar when I was 15, and my musical tastes included what was on the radio, really, because I lived in a very small town, and the only thing you would hear was stuff they played on the radio. So it was like Boston, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, David Bowie, you know, Jimi Hendrix, of course. Scorpions were real big.
Okay.
Rush, living very close to, you know, to the Canadian border in Toronto. We heard a lot of Rush on the radio. But to me, like all those guys and those bands, those guitarists were like, might as well have been, they were born that way. They were just up in these clouds. Like they weren't real. They were just these sounds and these guys that were, I don't know, living in this imaginary world and playing on the radio. Like I never thought I could be anywhere near, you know, even touch them with a 10-foot pole. But what it took for me was one day one of my friends had found like this punk rock tape at school. It was the Dead Kennedys.
Right.
Right? So he brought it to me and he's like, oh my God. And Eddie Van Halen freak, which we all loved Van Halen. You know, we'd seen Van Halen and it gave me goosebumps. Like I saw him running around smiling on stage. I'm like, I want to do that. That's so cool. But I could never do that. These guys are untouchable. They must go to Berkeley School of Music their whole lives. Well, he brings me this punk rock tape and they're all laughing at it. They're all listening to it. Listen, this is terrible. It's the worst music I've ever heard. I took the tape and I was like, can I take this home? I took it home and my whole trajectory of with my friends just went into a totally different direction because I got into this wormhole of what is this punk rock stuff? It's so weird and like, I loved it. I thought this is the coolest music I've ever heard. The Dead Kennedys, East Bay Ray was one of my favorite guitar players back then. It was like a political surf punk, surf rock, like Dick Dale, but with real explosive.
It's funny. Again, I remember there was one cool kid in my class at school. Dead Kennedys, Butthole Surfers, really early Chili Peppers. You know that, and I think I don't think I got it in the way that he did, and obviously you did. I think I was probably a bit more you know, my musical tastes were a bit more mainstream than that. But I remember that mid-'80s kind of really underground sense of like you say, a kind of a punk rock style of music. It
was just so foreign to me, and you couldn't go to the local record store and find any of that stuff. I was like, what is this stuff? What kind of, there's a whole...
Definitely not on the radio.
No. And even like Slayers and Metallicas and Iron Maidens weren't even, Judas Priest was barely, you know, they weren't even on the radio yet. So back then we had to go into record stores and look at the album covers and flip through and be like, wow, this looks really cool. This album cover is done really well. The music inside must be really good as well. Wasn't always the case.
I remember there's that famous Dead Kennedys album cover, isn't it? With I imagine that would probably be banned nowadays, or was probably banned at the time.
Well, the record we're talking about was called Frankenchrist, and it had Penis Landscape. Was the fold-out H.R. Giger poster inside that was totally banned. So when I finally found the actual vinyl version of it, I scooped it up, and I was like, oh my God, I have it. But it was had stamped banned on it, and it was like the PMRC and Jello Biafra. And
that's right.
Later on, I learned all about the whole, you know, the First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and all that stuff. And it just sent me down this whole nother path than trying to learn Eruption, like all my friends, you know, probably some of them still are. You know, I was just like, I can't do that. I'm just going to do what I can do and do the best at it. So that trajectory took me down to the Ramones. And I went out, snuck out of my house with some punk rock friends of mine. There were only a handful of us in the school. We drove from Rochester to Albany in the middle of the night to see the Ramones play. And it blew me away. I had the same feeling, the energy and everything as seeing like Van Halen or whatever. But these guys dressed more like I did than like, you know, Dave Lee Roth and the Van Halens, and you know, it was such a shtick, you know. Then I saw the Ramones, it's like, oh my God, these guys are so. This is what's cool, because only the cool people are here, because like they know what's up, what's the next cool thing. And what I learned was like, that guy's playing one chord, and they just played 60 songs in front of me in 30 minutes, and I blew my fucking face off, and. You know, Eddie Van Halen's got two hands over here, and he's playing all this really complicated stuff. I'm like, I can do that. I can play one chord. So I literally I was 15, 16 years old, and I just started a band immediately and started doing cover songs of all these punk rock songs and learned along the way. I never took a lesson in my life. The guys who taught me how to play guitar is, James Hetfield, Kerry King, Greg Ginn from Black Flag was one of my favorite guitar songwriting dudes, because he was real sloppy and he played these really great riffs that were like party riffs, but really dark, evil lyrics with Henry Rollins, and then
Henry Rollins,
just wild guitar solos. So I started trying to emulate him, and I remember taking some of my dad's, his stereo equipment that he had all over the house because he had the store, and I had like an old MXR. I didn't have an amp yet. I just had the guitar. I had this old MXR EQ with the little knobs, and I think I had soldered some RCA cables to a 1/4-inch jack and plugged it into the record section of my tape deck. And if I put it into record with pause on, so I'm not actually recording anything, it sent a signal to my stereo through my Advent speakers from the 70s that when I would strum the guitar, it would come through all that. So now I had an amp, but it sounded so shitty.
That's probably quite a good sort of authentic tone for that style of music, isn't it? Just
yeah. I didn't have I didn't know anything about a distortion box. There wasn't any music store in town, so I literally just started trying different things, and I got the sound out of, my dad would come in there, what the hell are you doing? What's all that? We're here, Dad, I need an amp and I need a distortion box. And he would say to me, distortion? Billy, we're trying to, cut out distortion, because he's in the hi-fi world.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I need a distortion box. And I need, he brought me home U2 War.
Great.
And that's The Edge at the time, he was a weird fucking guitar player. He was playing really bizarre stuff with a lot of delay and a lot of just open string rhythm kind of things going on, and more simplistic, you know what I mean? So when I heard that record, I started learning those songs with some of the neighborhood guys who were playing bass and drums, and it just really started me in the right direction, I think, with the roots that I needed to become who I am today.
I honestly, it's so much fun, I think, whenever I get to meet someone that's kind of grown up in a similar era, because it's all these albums. You go, oh yeah, I remember those first 2 or 3 U2 albums, Boy and War, and then the live Under a Blood Red Sky album. Again, it's just like, I always think what's weird for me now is what I suspect at the time was probably just a week of listening to an album before you move on to the next one, had such a profound it feels to me now like I would need to listen to that music for a year for it to have the same impact on me that at that age it had just hearing it.
You had those virgin ears,
yeah.
And you hadn't experienced anything like that before. And, back then when you get a record album, an actual vinyl, it's a whole process. You take it out of the sleeve, you take it out and you put it on the record player, and you move the needle on, and you set the volume and EQ just right, and then you look at the album cover, and hopefully it came with some lyrics or pictures on the inside, and you'd sit there and enjoy it, and you'd listen to it the whole way through, and if
in the order that the artist wanted you to hear it, all that kind of stuff.
And I feel like Mastodon, my band now, that's what we try to do, is do the same thing. That's why a lot of people ask us about the album covers, like, where do you get your artists, and why so intricate and all this stuff. And I feel like, well, the music that we've poured our heart and souls to create, that's on the inside of this jacket, this album cover, the album covers, it has to reflect that greatness that we've poured all this time and energy into. So when you see, because I'm still that 15-year-old kid at the record store looking around for the next new cool thing, like, oh, look at this Slayer album cover, that looks really evil, I'm gonna buy this. And then the music inside is just as evil as the cover.
Now, I must admit, I'm probably relatively late to the party with sort of the Mastodon thing. I certainly wasn't, I wasn't one of the fans, from 20 years ago.
Hey, we're always partying, man, so come on over.
But I kind of feel like there's there's definitely you've obviously gone on a journey from that sort of 15-year-old player through to the guy that formed Mastodon. Clearly even early Mastodon is not just like trying to be the Ramones. It's much more sophisticated than that. So how did that influence, or what was influencing you over that period of time to give you that more sophisticated kind of, and sophisticated, I don't mean that to sort of in any disparaging way to sort of Ramones, but it's not just all 100 miles an hour, one chord, 30-second songs. They are much more complex compositions than that. So what prior to sort of starting to write that first Mastodon album, what was your journey, and the rest of the guys as well? How did you all come together?
Well, living in upstate New York most of my life, I think I was always playing in different bands. I guess going a little bit before that, so moving from like punk rock, I think I started to outgrow it, because I had learned all these crazy cool songs and I'd formed a band and we were doing it, but I wasn't satisfied, I guess, with I was still growing as a musician and needing more and just eating up like every guy I saw play guitar or new band that was coming out. And even still this day I'm finding bands from the 70s and 80s that I'd never heard of. Like for instance, Marky Ramone, speaking of the Ramones, the drummer, he had a band called Dust, I believe. And I had like Spotify on or something, just on like 70s rock or something, and like I kept hearing these songs and I was like, what is this? I never heard this before. And I looked it up and it's Marky Ramone's one of his first bands. I was like, this is like some really proggy 70s cool rock and roll stuff. So I'm always discovering this new stuff, and it obviously influences me in some ways. But as my hunger grew and my playing got better, I think I have some of my contemporaries back then I went to high school with, my buddy Bernie, who always was turning me on to stuff, and he and I would maybe smoke a joint after school, ride the school bus home, and he still plays drums, guitar, but I would play guitar, and we'd cover all these Slayer tunes, and I barely knew who the Slayer was, but like, dude, listen to this band. I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. So I kind of moved on to listening to Slayer, and when I saw Metallica, again, with the album cover, I looked at the back of Master of Puppets, I'm like, these guys look just like me and my friends. They got ripped jeans, they got Misfits shirts on, they're into like Sex Pistols and the Ramones and like this punk rock kind of thing, but they're playing metal. So it's very interesting to me. Same with Slayer. They had Dead Kennedys stickers on Hanneman's guitar in the pictures. I'm like, these guys are like really satanic. How can they can't listen to punk rock? But I had to have the album and start listening. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, to me, I know Metallica and Slayer got a lot of their influence from there, but to me that stuff was like, I don't know, it was too glam. Right. Way too glam. Like the high-pitched voice is what got me. I was just like, whoa! They open their mouths. I'm like, I can't get into this stuff. It's just too weird. It wasn't heavy enough for me. I need the dark, growling, summoning Satan, vocals of Tom Araya. So I just kind of evolved my guitar playing through that. So immediately when I started listening to a lot of Metallica, there was one of those bands, like a gateway band, you know. I had to have a Gibson Explorer, a white one. I was like, I've got to have a guitar like that dude. I got to have a Marshall amp. I got to have whatever they have because they sound great. And, I'd always listen to Rush, and Rush had always, especially like their first album that not a lot of people know about. Right. They had the original drummer, and they sounded like a 70s rock band. They sounded like a Canadian version of Led Zeppelin. Oh, wow. And I loved Zeppelin at the time. Zeppelin is still one of my favorite bands. Jimmy Page is one of the best guitar players in my book. He's soulful and came up with so many great songs, and it's all riffs. That's what I love, is riffing out.
Riffs is, I think, that's where I think I see where Mastodon takes a very different road to the sort of the punk rock stuff that you said influenced you earlier. Interesting that you said Metallica was the gateway band, because I can completely see that as part of the journey. Although I think even then, maybe even then, I think you've taken it to another. The sort of the Metallica hits that I think have become most popular are still relatively straightforward riff songs, and I see more of the proggy influence in the Mastodon stuff than straight up Metallica kind of stuff. So how did the four of you meet then? And was that, because that's the, I know you were in bands prior to Mastodon, but that was the first band that had any real success, wasn't it?
Pretty much. So back to my days in Rochester, Braun, our drummer, is from Rochester as well. And I'd watched him play in this band called Lethargy for years. I was like, God, I'd seen them once, and I said, who the hell are these guys? Where are they from? And everyone's like, they're a local band. I'm like, really? Like, they're really fucking good. Super technical death metal. The guitarist, Eric Burke, sang, and just like never repeating. They play like one riff, real slidey, weird single-fingered stuff, and a lot of guitar harmonies and stuff like that. And the drums were impeccable. They were just like, note for note drums right to the guitar. It was just like like stop and start, math rock kind of just weird shit. And I was like, this is really bizarre. It's not, they're labeled as death metal, but to me it's more like this weird math formula that they're doing. So I was very intrigued by them. Eventually joined the band.
Okay.
And I'd never really played like that. I was more like, playing like punk rock, like 4-chord fast stuff. But I've looked at it as a challenge. So I started playing with them for a few years, and we could have gone somewhere, I think, but we're all kids and didn't really know how to do it in upstate New York. We're just kind of waiting for the record execs to come knocking on our door, which they didn't do. So I did that for a while, and played in a few other bands in Rochester. I felt like I was playing almost every night, and at one time I think I was in 3 or 4 bands at the same time, and it was really fun and great, and the scene in Rochester was great back then. But so Braun and I knew each other. I ended up moving to Atlanta in '97 to just kind of my girlfriend at the time, who I'd been with since high school. She was going back to college and was going back to school there, so I looked at it as my chance to broaden my horizons once again. I was like, I need to get out and like play with people that are going to go somewhere, because she kind of gave me one of those like, what are you going to do with your life kind of moments, and I was like, I don't know. I'm happy being a big fish in a little pond here, but I really thought she made me think about it. And I was like, I want to play guitar. I want to be in a band. I want to live that dream that I thought of when I was a kid, when I first saw Van Halen, and Eddie Van Halen smiling, playing. Like, that dude looks like he's having a good time. He's probably getting paid a lot of money. So I moved down to Georgia, and it wasn't long after that I had moved back up to Rochester because I couldn't find anyone to play with. Everybody wanted to be a rockabilly guitar player in Atlanta. I was like, rockabilly? That's freaking last year, man. It's like, let's play some of this cool metal stuff I'm coming up with, and people just looked at me like I was crazy. I don't know what that northern stuff that is, but it's not cool down here. But Braun and I ended up playing for about a year in this band called Today Is a Day, which was outside of, right around, near Boston. And when we did that, we had really, I'd kind of seen how easy it was to actually be in a band that tours. I was like, this isn't really that hard. You just got to jump in the van and just do it. Just start knocking on people's doors like, hi, we're here to play, and just at venues. And at the time, there was this website. It was BYOFL, like Book Your Own Fucking Life .net, something like that. And
dial-up.
Yeah, dial-up, exactly. And I literally, when we stopped being in that band, I was like, please come with me to Atlanta, because we had been playing in these bands together, and we've got this closeness, and we do well. We're good friends, and we're doing great things together. So let's continue that. And he came down to Atlanta with me in 2000, and I'd already kind of known Brent from playing. He's played in a few different bands. So I was like, I know this crazy guy Brent. He's a really great guitar player. We could call him up, and we started like trying people out. And one day, we got with Brent, and his band, 4 Hour Fogger, was him and Troy.
Right.
And they were kind of dissolving just as we were showing up. And we were looking for a bass player, singer, and a guitar player. And they were like, that's great, because we're looking for a drummer and another guitar player. It's like, cool, let's join forces. And we literally started jamming like a month after Braun and I had moved. I'd moved back to Georgia, and he came with me, and we rented, I was like, let's keep this ball rolling with the last band we were in, because we had met so many musicians on the road and had a good rapport with the last record company, Relapse Records out of Philadelphia. They were like, you and Braun, you guys are good together. All the stuff you guys do is really cool. Keep us in mind for the next project you do. So I was like, there you go. That's our key to getting our foot in the door. So, we told Brent and Troy that, and we said, let's just start, I had already had some songs I had written, and those guys had songs they had written, and that's what became our very first EP, which was, it was Call of the Mastodon was the final thing, but it was like we did like a 9-song demo. Right. We recorded that. Relapse picked up, I think, 5 of those songs and put it out as a Life's Blood EP. They're like, we're going to test the waters with 5 of our favorite tracks off this 9-song demo. And we started touring on that, in bookingyourownfuckinglife.net, and like just going on people's basements and sleeping on floors and eating spaghetti and loving life. I was like, this is great. We're not getting paid. We're just doing it. I was like, this is what I always wanted to do. This is so much fun. I didn't know that bands like us got paid eventually. You know what I mean?
Now, this is the first time I've met you, and I've not met Braun or Brent or Troy before. So, but from watching kind of the videos that you put out, and I watched the documentary you did in 21, which I thought was a very cool piece of work. You're all quite different. You come across with quite different personalities on screen. Is there like a what's the right word? Does that difference add to what you can produce as Mastodon, or is it does it create tension, or not in a don't give away any sort of
well, we're all
secretly we all hate each other kind of,
we're all from the same dinosaur egg, but we basically we're 4 different people with different influences in music and backgrounds growing up, but I think the way I look at it, I can really only speak for myself, is that we've all got our eyes on this prize of, spent many, many years, all of us in different bands, trying to do what Mastodon's finally doing. Mm-hmm. And we all realized that right off, like the first day we jammed, like, oh, we really got something special here. This is really cool. And we really just write music for ourselves. It's great that we have a fan base. We wouldn't be who we are without our fan base, obviously, so thank you. But it's really like when we write songs, and when I write songs, I'm trying to impress those guys. Like, yeah, I've got this cool stuff, and it puts me in the under the lamp of like, I really got to like come up with something cool here to impress these guys, because they've got pretty high expectations. Mm-hmm. But I think everybody's personality and differences only contribute to the making our band even better than, say, a band of guys who just hire, it's like one songwriter in the band and they just hire the rest of the guys to play, like studio musicians or something. But for us, it's like everybody writes, everybody contributes, everybody works really hard in the band to like make it what it is. And I think Mastodon is definitely a sum of all 4 parts. It's not just like, if you took any one of us out of it and, go do your solo album, it's not going to sound anything like Mastodon. It's just something that the 4 of us, with all of our different backgrounds, we come together and, like the Power Rangers.
Yes, there's an interesting question. So how would a Bill Kelliher solo album sound?
Oh, man. I don't know yet. I've been trying to work on that. I've been trying to figure that out myself. I'm like, what would it sound like? Would it sound like this? Because I feel like when I do write stuff, I'm like, it sounds too like Mastodon and what people would expect. Probably like some smooth jazz.
Yeah! Like, imagine that. Imagine that thousands of Mastodon fans rush out to buy your solo album only to find out that
like
it's
Brazilian polka, a little Weird Al. I have no idea, honestly. I just have to do it and just...
Covers of the girl from Ipanema or whatever it was called. I love it.
That'd be me. And the video would be me in a diaper on the beach, with a big cigar and sipping on a
pina
margarita.
colada or
whatever.
Margarita.
Yeah.
I want to talk about 22 plus years, 23 years of that's some feat. You know, lots and lots of bands won't make it that far. What do you think the enduring success is of the band? You know, is it just the brotherhood of the four guys that keep wanting to work together, or?
I think that's part of it. You know, like I was saying, we kind of have our eyes on the prize of like this is our career. This is like what we've done with it, and what else are we going to do? It's really all I know how to do is like play 4 chords, you know. You know, I think time just kind of really flies by when you get in the van. That's how I say it. Go on tour, get on the tour bus, you know. And you're off for 3 years, you know, on and off the road, and like, you know, doing a record every 3 years, and then all of a sudden it's been like 20 freaking years, and I've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I'm like, God, how did that happen? Because I didn't have kids when the band started, but now I've got grown children in college, and it's like,
is Mastodon your eldest child, and then you've got 2 other ones?
Basically, yeah. I mean, when you're in a band with 3 other guys, like we have been, it's like you're married to those people. You don't sleep with them every night, thank God. I mean, when you're on tour, you're all together all the time. So you have to like learn how to smell each other's farts without cringing. You have to like learn how to deal with each other and try to maintain that friendship, you know, where it's not always apple pie and roller coasters and ice cream cones. You know, we're just like anybody else. We have our ups and downs. But for us, it's been mostly ups. You know, I think it all goes back to like, hey, let's be adults here and let's try to do Mastodon as long as we can, you know. And for me, I think we said in the early days, like, no one's allowed to quit. Like, you have to get fired, or we're all in this together. We're basically like, we are doing this together. And it's not easy to find, you know, a band of guys that are willing to like sacrifice everything to just give up their jobs or whatever. I mean, all of us, we didn't really have jobs. We were just kind of like in between jobs, sleeping on couches. Troy slept on my couch for a couple of years, you know, and he was just like, I never really found out what his job was. Like, what do you actually do? Like, sometimes he was like, he would deliver live lobsters sometimes to like, I think he was a delivery guy, and then he was like a postman, and Brent, it's like, do you guys even have jobs? They're like, oh, when are we going on tour? I'm like, what about your jobs? Like, don't worry about it. And like, we were all just kind of carefree, even though I was like 30 when we started. So it's just kept us together. You know, we just make each other laugh, I think. I mean, there's, even at this point, you know, it's just like being married to those people for 24 years, like, you still crack me up. Or I think it's like when we get tired of like, I just can't come up with any riffs, or you're just doing it just to do it, or making a filler song, which we don't do. Every single song has to pass many, you know, high jumps and measurements, and, you know, it's got to stay in its weight class, and it has to take its road test, and everything has to, it's all got to jive. It can't be like phoned in ever.
Yeah.
And I think until that day comes, we'll just stay a strong band that we are.
Well, we're going to do a gear dive now.
Gear?
Yeah, I mean, I was, again, in the latest documentary where we get to see quite a lot of footage shot with inside your studio. So there is gear everywhere.
Yes,
tons of amps, tons of guitars. Not so many pedals. I didn't see. So I'm interested if that's your.
We hide those.
Oh, you hide those, do
yeah.
you? So look, let's go through the journey. Let's start with guitars. You're obviously a Gibson. You know, that's where your roots are with Les Pauls and Explorers and stuff, and then more recently working with ESP to do the Sparrowhawk, and there's a single cut guitar as well, isn't there, that you've done with them? Mm-hmm. But tell us about your, you know, your guitar journey and the ones that have really spoken to you and the ones that you feel most at home playing.
Well, honestly, when I was a kid, looking up to Jimmy Page and a lot of the old punk rock bands, it was like the Les Paul Custom was kind of like the guitar, and I was like, that looks so cool. And I finally got to touch one in real life and play it. I was just like Boner City. I was just like, oh my God, this guitar is so fucking, it's just, there's something about picking up a new guitar that for me, it just inspires me to write something brand new. You know, it could be another Sparrowhawk, just pick another one up. There's something exciting about it and it's inspiring, you know. I think that's why there's so many different types of guitars, shapes, colors, you know, features, whatever. But I've always been drawn to the Les Paul custom. That's just kind of like, you know, I own like 20 of them. I'm just like, I just can't stop. They're kind of like my collector. Not that I play them all, but I definitely collect them if I see one. And it's, you see one and you play it, and you're just like, I must have this. It has the mojo that I've been looking for. And that happens to me quite a few times a year when I'm out. Because I'm out on the road all the time. I'm always on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace looking through each city, like, who's got a guitar for me? Because you have a lot of time sitting around backstage, and what else to better pass the time but look for new guitars.
And that unblocks, I mean, anyone that doesn't play guitar that's married to someone that does play guitar will inevitably go, why do you need so many guitars? Like that's that standard question. But is it, you know...
I get asked that a lot. I say, why do you have so many fucking purses?
But is that for me is always a new guitar, or going back to something that you've got a personal relationship from, that you haven't played for a long time, always unlocks something that, I don't know, you just takes you on a different musical journey, or just takes that path that you know, just couldn't find before. Is that, do you have a similar?
I just find that a new guitar makes everything better. It does.
You should work in guitar sales.
Yeah, that's my pitch. Yeah. These are the guitars you're looking for. Guitars make everything better. Well, you know, like if the girl cheats on her husband and then walks in the guitar store, there's your victim. Like, here's a nice $25,000 Les Paul Custom 1969. That'll make everything better.
Everything better. Everything better. So Les Pauls, look, you know, the Les Paul is, you know, one of the most iconic looking guitars of all time, if not the most iconic looking guitar of all time. But you did it. You've had some Explorers in your time, and then obviously you've kind of almost merged the two together with the Sparrowhawk, kind of Firebirdy, Explorer-y, Les Paul-y kind of melting pot. So
yeah, you know, Les Paul's definitely was my first love, you know, and then the Explorer as well is just like such a cool shape, and it's big and it's heavy, and I've always been attracted to heavy bodied guitars, you know. When I was with Gibson for quite a few years, and you know, they did a lot of really nice things for me and made some really nice guitars for me. But when I went to ESP, one of my first questions to them was, can you make a guitar that I design? Is that possible? Because I don't love all their shapes. I was like, they're kind of pointy, and some are like, you know, they look like other guitars, and I want my own. I want to have, and they were like, absolutely, you know, whatever you want to do. So, believe it or not, it's really hard to come up with a brand new guitar shape.
Trust me, I know, yes.
And this one, yes, people will say, oh, it's just a Firebird. It's not a Firebird. Take a picture of this and put it next to a Firebird. They're different. I was playing a lot of RDs as well at the time. So I kind of was looking at the RD, and I wanted something that looked classic, yet felt modern. And I just started like drawing this shape, kind of looking at an RD, looking at a reverse Firebird, regular Firebird, just a couple different shapes, and sending them back and forth to ESP, and they'd kind of clean them up a little bit until I was like, okay, we're getting closer here. And the original one of this they had made, it was very tall here, and I said, it's almost the way I want it. And then I just kind of I drew it, and I just kind of cut it away here to make it more organically shaped.
It would be massive, I would imagine.
Yeah,
without that cutaway.
Pretty big. I actually just asked them to make a reverse Sparrowhawk design, just to see.
Cool. With
the headstock reverse to, you know, just to see what it looked like, because it might be cool. And it does look pretty cool, so hopefully that'll be coming out soon. But, you know, I'm like, make it as heavy as possible, because I like them heavy, big bodied. And once I got the very first prototype of this guitar, I was extremely happy with it. I was just like, man, it plays like a dream. I can't put it down. I feel great about it. It has more of a slim tapered neck, like an Explorer. It's thin. It's easy to play. It's heavy, and it's, the other thing that I wanted to make sure of, that it didn't do this.
Yeah.
Like an SG. I love SGs the way they look, but I can never play them because they always went top heavy. So I was like, where you place the strap button is going to be very important, and just the weight of it. I just want it to sit well and play good and look cool. And they did all those things.
What was the deep dive that you did on pickups? Because you've gone from making pickups with Lace and more recently with Seymour Duncan. So what was your what's the journey you've been on? Is it well, yeah, just tell us about
when I was with Lace for quite some years, and the pickups I worked on with them, I love. They sound great. And I just felt like it's just one of those things you can always improve on stuff. And I was approached by other companies. I was working with Seymour Duncan a little bit. They make great pickups as well. But I just had a pickup come out 2 weeks ago called the Hellbender with Mojo Tone.
Ah,
yeah.
Yeah. There's a smaller builder, aren't they, out the States? But I know a couple of other artists that have done stuff with them. Yeah.
They make... They're kind of overlooked, I think, and I was actually using some of their pickups already. Like they have one called the Black Magic. That was really great. They had a few clone, like a PAF clone, and I remember just having a box of their stuff because they'd sent me some stuff. Like I think I bought some stuff, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you're Bill Kelliher, cool. Here, why don't you try this out?" And I was like, "Okay," and I just kind of sat in the box for a while because I had my Lace deal. I was like, these are fine. But as I'm collecting more and more guitars, I'm like, why not try different pickups in each guitar and try them out? And I usually do all that myself, so that's why it takes so long. I'm like, I don't want to solder all this stuff together. But you know what? This pandemic, I'm going to start trying out some of these pickups people have been sending me. And with the Mojo Tone, I was like, man, these guys really know how to make a good pickup. And a lot of this, believe it or not, like, artist relations has a lot to do with stuff. Just talking to someone who actually knows your band, knows your style, cares about your string gauge, and like, they just seem generally interested. And I was like, Mojo Tone's always been there for me, and they've always been like, just had a really good guy that I talked to over there, and I was like, maybe I should call them up and see if we could work something out together. During the pandemic, we had time to like, send me something, this is what I want. And then I'll send it back. I'll keep installing new ones every week, and we'll just keep on narrowing it down until we get somewhere close to what I'm looking for. And I feel like they really nailed it with the Hellbender.
Is there a sense of... I kind of feel like the pickup world has kind of gone almost full circle from early, the early manufacturers like Seymour Duncan and stuff who would have gone, right, the amps don't have a lot of juice inside them, so we got to make these really aggressive pickups to really push the amp hard. And then amp manufacturers have made their amps more and more and more aggressive, and so actually some people now are saying, actually, I want a really low, underwound kind of PAF style pickup because otherwise it's just too much.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where are you sort of sitting in that camp? Are you kind of amps with lots of gain and low powered pickups, or less gain and higher powered pickups?
Well, the amps that I use the most is my signature Butter Slacks by Friedman, which we all know Friedman, they make amazing boutique amps, and they're very gain heavy, powerful. They sound great right out of the freaking box.
Yeah.
So exactly what you had just said about, I said, don't make the pickups like super hot, super crazy, because the amp is doing the work. I just want the pickup to do its job, just to pick up the sound of the strings as best that it possibly can without going into the whole active world, because I don't, they still sound great as well. I've had some EMGs, active ones that are, they're great, but to me it's kind of like, there's a more distinct sound when you're actually using the body and the wood of and the guitar shape, all are factors in the sound. Because EMGs, I feel like, or active pickups in general, I mean, you can strap it to a piece of beechwood and put those pickups on it, and it's going to sound it's going to sound great because of the pickups. So I don't want to leave out the great tones of these amps. The Victory is another great amp company I've been working with a lot, and I use a combination of the Butter Slacks with the Super Kraken, with the Helix controlling all the the MIDI selections and all that stuff, which is another great piece of gear. I can't live without the Helix. It's awesome. But yeah, I like amps that have lots of headroom to be super heavy and aggressive if they want to, and you kind of put them in the middle somewhere and then really just push that. Because as I've played guitar more and more and tried out different amps and such and things like that, it's like I do start to roll back on the distortion and all the things that make it more aggressive, and more turning up my mid-range instead of scooping the mid-range and just getting that real dark low.
Yeah.
I want to be heard, I want to, and as I practice more, I'm like, I'm playing better and better the older I get, because I'm finally taking the guitar more seriously and practicing a lot more.
That amp journey, again, in the studio, I saw you had a deal with Orange for a while, didn't you? Or you both were using Orange, weren't you, for a while?
Yeah, Brent still, I think, uses Orange stuff.
There's tons of Marshall stuff in the studio. Oh, yeah. And, of course, the Friedman amp, I remember playing that at the NAMM show maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it's a big sounding amplifier. But yeah, more recently, I know you've been coming over to see Martin Kidd and talking about stuff with him. I'm interested in that comment that you just made about finding that actually the sound is a little less gain, a little more mid-range. So almost the exact opposite of that kind of slightly, I was going to say cliche, but that's maybe not fair, but that kind of lots of gain, take the mid-range out, in isolation, get your big Metallica kind of sound. But I bet they probably don't even use an amp with those settings. It's like that's not the sound.
I feel like when I was a kid, I was always wanted to have that super crunchy, chunky, chugga sound, so I would scoop all the, I'm like, oh, this mid's not doing it for me. I scoop all the mid, and we all started on Peavey, I think. Peavey is like kind of, not that they make bad amps, because those amps still sound great.
Back in the day, they made great amps.
Well, if you had a Peavey, like a VTM 60 or a Butcher, I've owned a few Butchers in my life.
Not had that.
The Peavey Butcher was the shit.
I don't remember that. What is this? Was that solid state or valve?
No, it was valves. And it basically was the Peavey's version, the answer to the JCM 800.
Wow.
Back in the day. Single channel. It sounded exactly the same thing. We used to call them heavy because they were very heavy amps to lug around. But the VTM 60 was still a single channel. I think it had 2 inputs, low and high, and then it had like a little, the VTM stood for Vintage Tube Modified or something like that. And it had these little tiny dip switches you could really cue in like, I want to get more gain out of this channel and I want to get more treble. And you could just pick these little, it was, too much.
I wonder if we can try and demonstrate that sort of sense of like, so if we go sort of maximum gain, scoop the mid-range, and kind of go, this is the sort of sound that you maybe had when you were younger to get the sort of sound. So if you... I'll be honest with you, I love that sound, but I think the minute you put a mic in front of the cab and you start to record that within a band mix, it just it just becomes mush. It really
does. It's like what you don't think about when you're a kid and you're just playing guitar is when you join a band, there's other factors and soundscapes and frequencies that are happening. And I have to remember that, I've owned a studio for a few years. I'm learning about all those kind of things. Like, just because it sounds great in front of you right now doesn't mean it's going to translate well into tape.
So here's like more mid-range now about maybe 2 o'clock, and less gain.
See, to get stuff like this kind of intricate, nodey chords that arpeggiate, which I play a lot of, you kind of need that sound to...
It's much more articulate.
You need to hear the mid of that, because if it's all scooped out, it's going to sound like mush, really.
And then you just need a bass, let the bass line do the bass part rather than...
Yeah, trying to do everything with your sound.
And then that's... So it is 100% something that we've had to try and learn, and it's tough, I think. You know, you get a sound in the room that you go, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Record it all and you're doing playback and you go,
well, there's been, I've learned from, you know, watching like, you know, producers and engineers, they come in, you get your, like, is that your sound? Like, that's my sound. Okay, cool. And they're like, we're just going to like, it doesn't sound so good. Like, just trust me after it goes through, because, you know, you got microphones are putting gain on it. You have preamps that are putting gain on it. Whether you know it or not, it might be just a little tiny bit. So that's kind of where we started, you know, going into the studio a lot. And they started turning the gain down at the amp. And I'm like, oh, this sounds way better. I can actually hear my guitar now.
Are you layering lots of guitar parts? Or
oh, yeah, always. I mean, I'm a pretty tight player, especially with myself. So if I'm, you know, I'm layering stuff of myself, I like to use 2 different guitars, 2 different amps. As you probably saw in the documentary, you know, I was using 3 amps all at once just for one take. You know, like an old Marshall 800, which I collect those as well. And they all sound different, believe it or not. They all sound in the same range, but there's ones that sound way better than other ones. So I keep the ones that sound great. And I think I ran like a Sugar Drive MXR in front of it.
Yeah.
Which is just a tiny bit of, that's another thing I like to do, is just get an amp sounding like that, where it's got a lot of mid-range and sounding good, but not too overdriven. And then just throwing like a tube screamer, or in the Helix, I put a tube screamer, but set the gain at 0. And it just sharpens up. I don't like round, flubby tones. I like it to be really sharp and square, where you can hear, you know, if you want, you know, some certain songs and certain parts, I'll get a flubbier sound, but for your rhythm parts, maybe the vocals are going over, I like to be super tight and hear all that stuff. But yeah, I do overdub a lot of guitars and
you like to play it twice or 3 times rather than, you know, essentially just, I don't know, using a pedal just to. There was a brand, I forget who it was now, it might have been TC or something like that, had a pedal that kind of mimicked the idea of playing it twice.
The Mimic.
That's what it's called. Of course it was called a Mimic, yeah. That would be why. Well done, TC, for that subliminal brand marketing that made me remember it. But yeah, so you could actually adjust like how loose or how tight did you want the second track to be, but it was almost a little random in the way that it wouldn't give you an exact mimic. There would be this little tolerance that just sort of made it sound a bit more natural as you went through it, as if you were trying to play it twice. Or do you just prefer to go in and just literally track it twice?
No, I do everything the hard way, the long way. In the end, it's the time and effort you put into things that shows, you know, the little things. And that's the thing about, you know, the way I play guitar too. Like, I don't claim to be the greatest anything. You know, I can play guitar, I can write songs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what the kids that are out there today should know. That it's like, you just do you, be the best that you can. And for me, when I'm songwriting, it's just about adding like the little emotional notes for me. Like, for instance, if you know, something like Roots Remain, like. Like, when I wrote that first riff, I was setting the bar really high. I was like, holy shit, this is a great riff. What am I going to do that's going to be better than that for the next part? And I was beating my head against the wall for months. So I just put that on the back burner and kept on writing other songs for Emperor Sand. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, you got to have that in the record. It's got to be on the record somewhere. So maybe don't lower your standard, but don't set the bar so high and think that every riff has to be better than the last.
Yeah.
So I just came up with the verse, or the chorus actually, is just the. And I started there. And it's like, you don't have to be Steve Vai or Billy Gibbons to like make a good riff into a great riff. And at the time, you know, I was going through a really hard time. My mom was dying of brain cancer. And I was like, how do I for the emotions that are going through my mind right now into my song that I'm writing, you know. And it was just about sitting there and figuring what sounds like the emotion that I'm having. Like, it's going to be a sad song. So I just kind of 9 out of 10 times I'm writing a song, it's just like spitballing, just trying something new every time and seeing what sticks and what makes me happy. And I just kind of took the chord which kind of, to me, when it's just a lot of stuff I write, just move it up and then you move it back down. So it's like forwards, it's backwards. And that riff in particular, it's kind of like, it sounds like there's hope. And then there's despair. And that's kind of what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect epitome of like, you know, why our fans gravitate towards Mastodon and say like, wow, I really felt that riff. Like it really spoke to me. And it's like, well, yeah, because that whatever I did, I captured that feeling and now you're hearing it. And that's what I think music is all about. That's the best kind of music, is that emotional support music that when you listen to something, you're sad, you want to listen to something sad. You want to be like, I need someone shoulder to cry on.
For sure. I noticed, again, I don't know how indicative the way you're playing in here is compared to how you would be if you were in the studio or on stage, but you have very soft kind of right hand picking. It doesn't look like, you know, you see some players and it's like it's aggressive and it's part of the tone.
Right.
But is that, again, I'm just interested in how you've sort of, you know, how you've developed your picking style.
Well, I mean, I think I used to really play with the whole arm from the elbow, and then I kind of started really thinking about how to play more efficiently and just practicing like, you know, just trying to like, everything I would play when I first started was all down picking because it was punk rock and it was DIY and I was learning it on my own. It was Hetfield and everything was straight down. And then I started watching other players and really paying attention, and I think it's just, it's really about saving energy. And I just started using my wrist, and I'm like, if you got a big amp like this, it's got plenty of power behind it, you know it's going to sound great. It's just getting, because I always try to play into the strings, and I feel like there's a certain time to down pick, and there's a certain time to upstroke or kind of play in a circle. So it's all, I kind of choose what part, you know, like something is super aggressive, you want to hear the low note first when you're stroke, you know, hitting it down. So I play like that, but I don't know. It's just efficiency, really. Like that's really hard to straight pick, you know.
We'll come on to getting lessons with Bill towards the end of this video, but I did just on the sort of the final jigsaw piece of the gear question is pedals. So what does a Mastodon touring pedal board look like, or you know, is it huge and MIDI controlled and everything, or is it a tube screamer? You know,
it's, you know, it's funny you ask that because it kind of constantly changes every 5 years or so. You know, I used to be pretty simple. On tour, I would just bring a tuner, delay pedal, maybe a chorus pedal, tube screamer, and a switch to change channels on the amps. And that kind of evolved into like the TC Electronics G system,
cool
where
piece
I
of
was
kit.
like, wow, this is very cool because now you can change scenes. So instead of, I always had the problem of, you know, as our band went from only playing in one sort of sound, which is always heavy, always on. It's like, you know, as the albums progressed, as we progressed as players, it's like, oh, well, we're starting to write more stuff that you need to hear the notes, a little more intricate stuff and a little cleaner. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
And that's where like 2 amps started coming in, and because, you know, I would just use a Marshall 2210 my whole life, and that's 2 channels, but the clean channel isn't super, there's not a lot there to work with, you know. So I started, you know, trying like the TC G system, which allowed you to hit one pedal and you could have a clean channel, which would switch the channel, and then you'd have whatever, a chorus and a delay, and then with one step of your foot on the next pedal, you would have switch channels and have a distortion box on with a phaser or whatever. And that blew my mind that you could actually do stuff like that. Then I got into like loop pedals, which you could plug all your pedals into the back and just control any array or assortment of each one, which I found that blowing my mind too. Like, where's this been all my life? This is great. This is really cool. And then just kind of experimenting with all that. I went through Axe Effects, Kemper, Helix, which I still use Helix. And there's different iterations of that where I use it with real amps. Sometimes I use it with Synergy equipment, which I really love the Synergy. And I love the whole idea of Synergy because it's just the preamp section of your favorite amps, and all you need is a power amp. And you can travel with it because nowadays traveling, you can't travel with your whole rig, and we ended up too many times getting to Australia or getting to Japan and having to just borrow what's already there. And it's like, my stuff has a certain sound, and it's hard for me to get into playing unless I hear what I want to hear. Yeah. So when you travel with stuff that's compact, like the Helix and the Synergy stuff, which I have my own rig of that just for flying. But my pedal board now is just like the Helix, and maybe like a pitch shifter, or just a couple different choice pedals once in a while. But it's pretty simple now. Also, what I use is I run a lot of like the backing tracks that we use for like samples and sounds and click track. We do a lot of click track stuff, as of lately, because a lot of our last couple of albums are multi-dimensional. Yeah. There's a lot of layers in there, and there's a lot of things that we can't always pull off live that we really want to. Whether it's a glockenspiel over here or a triangle over there and a keyboard here, and it's so I have like this. It's a Boss RC 600.
You do all that from a loop, from literally.
Yeah, it's a lot of programming and MIDI controlling and all that stuff. So I've come a long way. I used to use like the Roland sampler. You press a button with your finger and it would play a goofy movie track, and then you'd start. Then we used to do that. And first I used to start with a tape deck. I used to have a tape deck, and I'd press play on the tape deck. And I had a dual tape deck with 5-minute tapes, were the shortest ones you could get. And we had to fumble with those and flip them over, and I'd forget to rewind them. And hang on, I'm going to start the set here. Brilliant. Yeah, a video of it. It's pretty funny. So I got a lot of things going on.
There's all the stories of the bands with ADAT doing exactly that, and then it would just stop halfway through a song.
I saw Ween in Boston when they first started touring, and that exact thing happened to them. I think it kept looping or something happened, because it was just the two of them. And then they had the ADAT machine. But I knew what an ADAT machine was at that time because we were recording with one. And I was like, oh, it looks like their ADAT machine is like stuck on a loop, or it just broke the tape or something, and they had to stop the show.
Well, I'm conscious of the fact of trying to sort of end this interview, obviously just to keep it within a certain time frame. But one of the things you told me over lunch, which I was amazed about, but I think people perhaps who've watched this and aren't aware of that will realize your passion for guitar and trying to give something back. You do lessons now with anybody that wants to, I guess, get involved and have presumably online lessons, right? Zoom and Skype or whatever stuff.
Yeah, I do them through
cool.
Zoom. Yeah,
I think that's super, super cool. I mean, I kind of, would love to have felt like, some of my guitar heroes when I was growing up would put aside the time to do lessons.
Absolutely.
So how does that work?
I feel a little late to the game because people have been asking for years about, do you offer Zoom lessons? Because for probably the past 10 years or so, I've been doing in-person lessons at the gigs. Like when we're traveling all over the world, hey, do you want to sign up for a lesson? I do a lesson, pass the time, and whatever. Because why not? And people have been lining up to do that for years, and it's been great. And a lot of people want a second, hey, I want to do another lesson, but when's the next time you're going to be in Timbuktu, And it's like, well, not for another 10 years. So.
You're big in Timbuktu though, right?
Yeah, we're huge. I mean, huge. We got the keys to the city and everything, man. It's just like, we just never go there.
It's the only place in the world that real Mastodon still exists.
They still
well.
do, yeah.
So
There's a little competition
why.
there, and they hear we're coming to town. They're like, "What? This is home of Mastodon." It's like, no, the band, dude, and not the social platform.
So where can people find it? Do they just contact you, or Instagram or something?
Yeah,
or?
like every once in a while because I'm doing it all myself. I don't have anyone I don't have a secretary or do anything like that. So I'm kind of doing it all myself, and I'm still learning the ins and outs of like the Zoom lessons. So you can write to butterslacks@hotmail.com. Yes, hotmail.com.
Yes.
Making a comeback.
MySpace, everything.
Well,
Go for it.
You see, man, those German laser discs are making a comeback too. You're gonna see. It's awesome.
Well, that's amazing. Well, we'll put links in that description below, and people can sign up and...
Yeah, it's an hour-long lesson, and it's just one-on-one, and we tell some jokes, and we play some guitar and answer your questions, and teach you some stuff. Hopefully,
I think that's amazing. Well, look, and as far as the last music that came out was 21 from you guys, and you've obviously toured that album a little bit after there. So what are we, 23 now? So what can we expect this year? More recorded music or tours?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, I hope so. There's a lot of things changing. Like obviously, the time is flying by, and I feel like it's time to just keep writing more and more stuff. You know what I mean? So.
The jazz record. That we talked
the
about
jazz
earlier,
record, the country record.
Oh yes.
The Dolly
Country
Parton
jazz.
collab. Maybe Celine Dion make a guest appearance.
Oh wow.
You never know.
You're aiming high.
I mean, we're trying to get Gallagher on there, but he passed away. Let's see. Yeah, we got some touring in the States coming up in April. So I just want to get back in the studio and continue writing because, you get on a roll with the records and just writing and feeling it. And it shouldn't be like up to, hey, put out a record every 5 years. And it's more like, let's put out a record when we feel creative and we feel like writing something and it really comes from the heart. So that's what our goal is this year.
Well, good luck with everything.
Thank you.
I still can't believe that we managed to get this together. And thank you very much to the chaps at Victory as well for kind of helping connect us. That's much appreciated. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again at some point in the future. And I will absolutely continue my deep dive into the world of Mastodon. And you should do the same. So thank you very much, Bill. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.